Hello, I'm Ben, DivKid, and recently I learned that AJH Synth had turned 10 years old, as it's been 10 years since the release of the MiniMod range. I got in touch with Allan and said let's make some kind of celebratory video, and on that note, this video is sponsored by AJH Synth. I got to know Allan back when those modules were released, making videos. We shared taxis back from the Funk House in Berlin at the very first Super Booth. He's been extremely supportive of the UK events we held as modular meets, and it's been a pleasure to work with not just the MiniMod range, but his other modules, offering this interesting kind of blend of really classic vintage tones and replicas, but also some really forward-thinking ideas too. The timing index is down below. You can skip around and focus on each of the sections that's really clearly laid out. I hope you enjoy this new format. Do let me know down in the comments. Let's hear the MiniMod modules first, and then we'll get to talking to Allan and things that followed beyond that range. So that's the sound of the MiniMod, in this case articulated as kind of two voices, but it's just this huge sonic palette that's really fun to play with. Now, I do have some reverb here, I'll turn that off for now, and starting with the first two oscillators coming in, two saw waves, an octave apart, playing the same line from my keyboard. Their pitch control comes into the glide and noise, which routes this around the back of the modules to all of the oscillators. However, the third one, we're breaking that normalization with a vol per octave sequence. If I open up the filter, turning these two down, this is sequenced by a 5-step sequence, and this doesn't play anything when I play the keyboard here. And additionally to this being the third input to the filter, I do have this split into the second input here on the VCA, taking the triangle output, so even if I turn this all the way down, you can just hear this nice soft triangle line playing all the time. It layers up against the filter really nicely, especially as we then blend. These oscillators back in. And in terms of articulation, I'm taking the main kind of pulsing envelope from my 5-step sequence into the VCA. And then I'm taking the main envelope that plays when my new pitch is changed from my keyboard to the filter. So we get both envelopes here into the filter, one into the third tracking CV input just for some kind of soft pulsing from that envelope playing my sequence, and the frequency CV input is then the envelope from my keyboard played envelope. So we get a mix of both there on the filter. This is the reverb, big load of slosh. But let's just have that in the background, kind of under 20% if you like. And with my keyboard coming into the glide and noise, I have upward slew, so when I'm going down in pitch it's not slewed, the notes don't glide into each other, but when I come up in pitch, they do. Two voices per keyboard played, one sequenced, all through the same kind of paraphonic articulation, big MiniMoog sound from the MiniMod. So Allan, hello. Welcome to DivKid HQ, DivKid Towers.
Great to be here. Yeah.
Sat in front of the Great Wall of Modular.
Oh, absolutely. It's I wonder how many Patreons would love to be in this room.
With a nice addition over your shoulder that we'll maybe come to later.
Yeah, sure.
We're sort of here for 10 years of the MiniMod.
That's right.
I learned a few weeks ago that you were celebrating 10 years.
That's right, yeah.
We started out about the same time, I think.
Yeah, I remember a few months after we got going, we got an email from you saying I do videos. So
pitching my wares.
So why not? Yes.
So I imagine most people watching know who you are, but for anyone new to AJH Synth as a brand, who are you and what would you say you do?
We make high-end Eurorack modules that I've been doing for about the last 10 years, and the motivation really behind it was I'm building my own modular system, and just we get it out there, and other people enjoy it too, and it's not market driven or anything else. It's just it's always been a passion, and here we are 10 years later, and the range is bigger than it was.
So this is your classic Model D signal path here, where the three oscillators, in this case three saw waves, mix into the filter into the VCA, an envelope for the VCA, an envelope for the filter cutoff, pitch tracking on the filter, and all the pitch behaviour coming through the glide and noise here into these oscillators. Have some effects which I'll remove. Let's turn down the oscillator that's kind of my sub here, an octave lower, and let's just listen to these arpeggios cleanly. And the mod wheel here comes into the 2/3 CV tracking here on the filter, so I can open that from the keyboard. Bringing in that lower octave. Let's drive these filters a little bit as well. Push all these inputs up. It's great when everything's just pushing and driving a bit here. Classic sound. It's just so good. So going back into some of your history, what was kind of a pivotal moment? Was it an album, an instrument that you played, something that kind of got you into synths in the first place?
I think synths, electronic music, really, it was Tangerine Dream, Phaedra, and Jean-Michel Jarre, Oxygene. And I just heard them, and then of course there's all of the Erasure and all of the UK stuff that was happening at the same time, and I just thought that sounds great, and I had an organ at the time, one of the electronic organs. I just thought that sounds terrible. I need something that makes these synth noises. So that's where it started.
So what was the first synth after the organ? It was terrible.
Casio CZ101, which was only marginally better.
I'm going to say, did that fulfill the need?
Yeah, yes.
So what was the first thing that you built or repaired or modded or?
Well, the first thing I built, I think, was probably a fuzz box when I was about 14, 15. and then a flanger that I built, and it didn't work. And so I built this thing, but that was it. I was bitten, and after that, just anything electronic I loved, and gradually we moved. I moved on to guitars. I was into guitars and guitar amps and everything for a good while, and then went back into synths, and I started doing repairs. So I was doing a lot of synth service, and that way I learnt, I learned the circuitry and learned how things should work, and that was the starting point. Now I built up a fair sort of vintage synth collection, and played in a few bands, and it was all keyboard synths, nothing modular at that point.
With the guitar side, was that you as a player, or just interested in amps and tech and
a player?
Right, okay.
Yeah, I played from being about 14. Played in the usual sort of school bands and stuff where you spend more time fighting than you ever do playing,
Yeah, I know that one.
I think we've all been there. And then I had to go out and get a real job and what have you, so that just became a bit of a background hobby rather than because the rockstar visions had gone by that time.
So here's a patch that really nicely married kind of vintage, thick, kind of subtractive bass tone with something with more edge, a bit more unstable, grittier. Turn a few knobs for a moment, and then we'll go through building the patch. So this patch uses 3 VCOs, 3 pulse waves at the core, and just works through the kind of standard MiniMod range. 3 oscillators, mainly into the filter, into the VCA. Now starting with the VCA, which is full of character and saturation, this is actually a dual VCA, where the first inputs and CV control is the first VCA, and this outputs into a master VCA, which on the original MiniMoog was from the volume pedal, kind of expression volume in on the back of the synth. Turning up the master, this is the noise from Glide and Noise into the filter, which is wide open, coming into the VCA, and it's this envelope here that controls this master. And I've plugged the envelope in at the master at the end, because despite however I offset or sequence and modulate the VCA, I just wanted this kind of clocked 16th note final shape to the sound in the VCA here. Now turning down the offset and turning up my CV source, I have a step sequence that's controlling the level in the VCA. The first one, before it hits this one, controlled by an envelope. And you can hear that gives this dynamic velocity style level sequence. So if we start with some offset and add some of this sequence, there's some level change and some motion that we're going to work into with the rest of the sounds here. Turning down the noise and turning up the first oscillator here. This is the first VCO, square wave with an LFO to its pulse width. And that just gives us this nice, classic, single oscillator bass tone. Turning down the filter here. I'm using the pitch tracking inputs, the third and the 2/3, whereas fault per octave there is full pitch tracking. A third with an LFO, so there's just a slight motion up and down on the cutoff, and 2/3 with this envelope. And this envelope plays on every note change. This one controlling the VCA plays on my 16th note clock. Now leaving that open, my second input and second oscillator here, again is a square wave, but it has PWM from the first pulse. There's audio rate pulse width on this one, and it's an octave higher. You can hear there's loads of edge and grit on that sound. So when we combine the 2. A rich, grittier sound. Which works really well here. And then the 3rd oscillator is a square wave again, but this time to the frequency CV input of the filter. And instantly, that gives some instability and added character. It's a bit wonky and kind of just on the edge of more standard musicality, if you like. Tuning up that oscillator, you hear these as much clearer, kind of vocal-like overtones. And that oscillator, while it modulates the filter cutoff, has its pulse width modulated by the 2nd oscillator that has its pulse width modulated by the 1st. So we have this kind of freeway chain of PWM into a dynamic VCA with some dynamic filter mixed modulation. Really rubbery, thick, kind of vintage meets modern, almost broken kind of patching. So how did you find modular? That was guitars, keyboards, kind of call it traditional synths if you like.
Yeah. I think it was probably about 2000, 2002, around there, and it was 5U.
Right.
I started I was quite fortunate that I was able to. I had a lot of time and a little bit of cash as well, and I just made it a full-time hobby. I started with synth DIY and fell down that rabbit hole and started building all of these different DIY modules, all of the CGS stuff, the Catgirl synth stuff, which was Ken Stone, and the Oakley, which is Tony Allgood, and some of the synth tech modem stuff, and then I built a lot of that, and then so I got into 5U in quite a big way, really.
So from when did that shrink down to Eurorack? Because that'll have been about the 2002 that was around.
Yeah.
I imagine not much of it, but
yeah. I mean, I landed up with quite a big 5U system, and then I started to think, well, I need very long patch cables and very long arms to use this. And at that time, there was the only real Eurorack around then was Analog Systems and Dopefer. Mm-hmm. And so I put together a little Eurorack system around the two, and so that really was the entry. But what I did was I built a lot of the 5U DIY stuff. I actually built into Eurorack format, so it was very deep cases and turned the PCBs the other way, so they're at right angles to the front panel, and so I had what looked like 3U Eurorack, but was all 5U circuitry behind it. And with that, I thought, this sounds great. And then I got onto sort of native Eurorack modules, if you like, and thought, they don't sound as good. I'm not quite sure why. The 5U stuff sounded better. And that really was when the MiniMod started.
Right, it was the sound driven. You felt like you needed to kind of put that sound in into the format. Absolutely.
And so the starting point with that really was the Model D. I mean, I'd had a few Model Ds, which obviously MiniMoog Model D. And to me, it just sounded fantastic. I just thought, this thing just sounds absolutely amazing. Why doesn't my Eurorack sound like that? Mm-hmm. So that I'm going to make that in Eurorack, and because I mean one of the big advantages of modular for me at that time was the open architecture and the fact that you weren't limited in the modulation choices that you could make. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to have 5 VCOs, you could have five, or if you wanted to create a stereo patch, even all of that was possible. So it was really the Model D was an amazing instrument, but very much a one-trick pony in terms of the patching that was in there. So that was the start, and I just thought, well, I'm going to recreate that circuitry, but make it in Eurorack and see how it sounds, and it sounded great.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt, but I think anyone that's heard any of them used anywhere, there's no doubt the modules and the original Model D doesn't sound great.
Yeah, and I mean that really has been the backbone of AJH, really. That everything is added onto that. But it's I mean, if you talk to any studio engineer, the signal path is everything, and and you just need one thing in it that isn't right, and the whole thing's gone. And the great thing about the Model D was that it sounded, every step of it in the signal path sounded fantastic.
So here's 3 voices out of the single MiniMod voice, with a couple of extra helper modules, but nothing really out of the ordinary. Really big layered stereo sound here. Some real filth if we want it. So running through the layers here, the first oscillator and all the orange cables is the shark tooth wave. It's really nice when, and I know this sounds really obvious, but the saw wave is too bright, a triangle wave is too dull. It is, by nature of its shape and the sound you get, the kind of perfect combination. It's the 3 little bears wave here. The shark wave, or shark tooth, is being split in a mult and going into 2 low pass gates. These have been struck and animated with different envelopes and triggers from my sequencer, and they come down into this echo cinematic delay, so we have a very stereo animated bass line here. A little bit of downward slew from the glide and noise. And that's kind of my bass layer. The second layer that I did, which is the simplest really, is the pulse width or pulse wave, square wave here out of the second oscillator. This is the yellow cables with a modulated LFO to PWM, straight into a reverb, a huge reverb as you can hear that's just over 50% wet, and that reverb straight into the mixer. And if you listen to that pulse width modulate, you can hear that the modulated LFO is kind of coming up and down in rate. Just creating this really rich, lush ambience that we can fade in. This is playing the same pitch sequence through that glide and noise connection through the bus board. And with just these 2, we could drop this lower. And play 1 rhythmic layer against 1 rich, modulating pulse and reverb sound. We're muting both of these in the mixer here. The rest of the MiniMod modules, there's a single oscillator voice here. We have a saw wave up into the ring SM this time for some extra colour and subs, into the filter and VCA. And if I open up the filter, my right envelope has a little ratchet. But the envelope that's playing to the filter doesn't. And again, this is the 3rd and 2/3 pitch tracking with an LFO, a modulated one again, and an envelope. I have some linear CV from my modulated LFO, which just because it's modulated, it's all kind of wonky, drunk, unstable sounding, but just a tiny bit of it, when you start going against the other sounds, it's almost like a bit of a vibrato or a chorus as this oscillator just drifts in and out of tune a little bit. So this sound being a saw comes up into the ring SM. I have the frequency doubling happening. And some sub. I could say go up an octave and add another sub. So kind of a multi-octave thick layer from 1 basic sequence. But I like how it sits here. So octave up from the ring mod, octave down from the subs, into the filter. And this plays a mixture of my main sequence and an additional arpeggio sequence. They're both being precision added together, so one transposes the other. there's a final thing here as I turn up the frequency CV. That's this lower bass oscillator frequency modulating the filter. So the one that's playing this layer, the triangle from that oscillator comes across and you can just bring in some filth performatively. So building these layers back up, bass layer and sequence here from the MiniMod and Ring SM. Bit of filth. And some droning ambient PWM. Really fun pulling out some different layers here with the additional Eurorack system. Is there any kind of specifics you have to be aware of? Like what makes your MiniMod range? Because there are other, say, ladder filters out there and clones of those circuits, but they don't all kind of just nail that thing. Is there any kind of specific circuit-wise you have to work with, or something that's particularly tricky to replicate?
I think it's keeping it true to the original as much as you can in terms of how it sounds, because there's lots of, even a small change, a small component change. You think, oh well, it needs that, I'll just substitute this for it, and you lose it. So it's every part of it, it's thought out really, but also with the Model D, there's a lot of it that people thought, well, it's the filter that makes the Model D sound so good. Mm-hmm. But if you use a Model D without the VCA, it doesn't sound like a Model D anymore.
Yeah.
The VCA isn't just a voltage-controlled amplifier; it's a voltage-controlled distortion unit as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there's lots of lovely second harmonic distortion going on in there, and even more so when you did the old trick of the the headphone out.
Or feedback trick, yeah.
Yeah, and the external input. But so all of that really was what we looked at. But we also looked at the different. I did a lot of research onto the Model D as to what happened during the production run of it.
Or kind of revisions through its life.
Yeah, why did the early ones sound better? Why did this particular one sound bad? And what we found was that, particularly, I mean, obviously the oscillators, the very early oscillator that we used, does sound a little bit more open, a little bit nicer than the what was called the early oscillator, which was actually the second generation, and then the late oscillator, which was used in most of the production. So the oscillator makes a bit of a difference. The filter, there were changes made to the filter as well, in that they used match pairs throughout the whole ladder on some of the early ones, whereas later they just matched the top and bottom pairs. Okay. Yeah, that makes a bit of difference. But with the VCA really was the thing that makes the most difference. So if you have a late MiniMoog, you want to make it sound like an early one, there's 3 resistors you change in the VCA, and that really does bring it to life.
And is that kind of a saturation in the gain stage thing that they cleaned up? Or
I talked to Jim Scott, who was the original one of the there were 2 engineers. It wasn't Bob Moog that designed the Model D, as some people may know, some may not. But it was 2 of his engineers, which was Jim Scott and Bill Hemsworth, and they were the 2 engineers on it. And what happened was when the when they first designed it, they actually miscalculated the gain on the VCA, so that the first couple of hundred were overdriving, and then they had they realised, and they got back and they said, oh, I think we should fix it, and so they fixed it sort of later, which was in the after the company had changed hands. They did actually fix it, and that it sounded terrible. And then they did kind of a halfway house that brought it back, but that's probably the biggest change on the Model D.
So here we're looking at just how much character is in the VCA. And if I back everything off here, my master is this envelope, and at the input I have one triangle oscillator that is my root, and another tuned up higher. So two triangle oscillators. I'm offsetting the first VCA, and it's the envelope here on the left that controls the master, the second VCA that was from the volume pedal input on the back of the MiniMoog. This is two VCAs in series, if I haven't said that already. So the first bit of drive and character comes from simply pushing up these two audio inputs. This is how much extra low end there is. And when I push both up full, there's loads of character there. It's got this thick, kind of almost octave up, organ-like overtone. And for some added character here, if I actually turn down the offset of the VCA, on CV input 1 I have the third oscillator, which is an octave higher, so an octave higher than my root triangle. If I make that 2 octaves higher, that's a bit more obvious. We have AM here, audio rate amplitude modulation. Sticking to just 1 octave higher, you can hear these extra fuzzy overtones that this creates. And then the second CV here is an envelope playing a faster rhythmic pattern. And it's the main envelope on the master that's actually controlling the overall shape. We're offsetting, driving, audio rate modulating, and additional rhythmically modulating the VCA. 2 triangles and this lovely fuzzy saturated sound with plenty of animation. So going beyond the MiniMod range, it was a Sonic XV filter that came next.
It was, yes.
Something special about that one, or why that over, say, other kind of classic filters and designs?
Yeah, it was just the transistor ladder I just found very interesting. It was the whole kind of EMS thing, the VCS3, what have you, had the diode ladder filter, and a very different character. And it was just around that time that I bought a Moog, it was the Mu Sonics Sonic 5, which had the diode ladder filter, and that I think that was a bit of a workaround to get away from the EMS pin. I mean, I may be wrong on that, but I just found it quite a fascinating filter. And when I started building it, I was amazed at how much more punchy it was. Just how different a low pass filter could actually be, just because of the topology that's used in it.
Yeah, you wouldn't even. Yeah, you could almost take the word ladder filter out of it in terms of how different they feel and sound. Yeah,
it's very different.
And then you push that a lot further with the shaping as well.
Yeah. Well, again, I was I just thought, well, it's 14 HP, and what else can I put in there that's interesting, and I was quite fascinated by wave folders and things. So I thought, well, if I put a wave folder in there as well, and if we're trying to do some wave folding on the resonance loop, what's it going to sound like? And I tried it, and it sounded great, and so I landed up with a module that you can put a sine wave into, and then turn it into something complex and filter it.
Yeah, I think it was the first time I'd had a resonance path with kind of colour and shaping options as well.
Yes.
Is that something that's been done on a synth I'm not aware of, or was that just genuine curiosity on your part?
I'm really not sure. It was just curiosity on my part. I mean, that was probably fueled by the Polyvox filter that I cloned 20, 30 years ago or something. It was I got the I bought a Polyvox and imported it from Russia at the time, and was just fascinated with the resonance on that thing. And I mean, we'll cover this at a later date as well. But it was something, the colour in the resonance loop of a filter really does change the tone of it completely. And so that adding that to the Sonic XV just added another dimension to it.
So the Sonic XV can be utterly brutal. Really cutting and just dripping in character. I mean, this is one oscillator and the Sonic XV, and that's it. And it's a bandpass. Yet still kicking out that low end really beautifully. So let's just simplify things here for a moment. We'll use the 6 dB output, which is a 1-pole low pass. Now this is just a triangle straight through, little bit of buzz. But a clean triangle. It's of course from the MiniMod oscillator here. If we blend across to the input mix, this has the input wave shaper with 3 different shapes. For adding lots of harmonics through wave folding. Middle one a bit buzzier there. Bottom one with a bit more low end. And then that really lovely soft 6 dB low pass. Now the resonance also has a resonance mix and wave. And it's nicely resonant. It's got a good character on its own, but blending this across to its wave shaper and folding the resonance path, there's even more bite and character. If I drop this down an octave, really lovely. Almost liquid resonance, but with the extra kind of bite and character, and a whistly top end. So if we start to animate this, let's say frequency CV with an envelope, play my sequence again. And it's almost got like a low pass gate kind of West Coast twang to it. Then we'll modulate the input wave as well. Here's that 24 dB slope. Got that thicker, kind of more low end focused sound. And the band has a really lovely twang. Let's go from a triangle input wave to a saw, which is where we started. It's just oozing this really unique character. Back to 6 dB low pass. Plenty of character, and a filter that can then add a load of harmonics and then take them away again. So as well, something different from a kind of classic design, the Ring SM came, which is ring modulation with 3 inputs, not 2, which again was a first for me. Sub-oscillators, saturating, mixing.
Yes.
How did that come to be? Because in one sense it's an odd collection of things, but really not in use.
It's 3 modules in one really, and the way that you can mix and match what it actually does. That was the first module that I designed with that kind of approach, and it started just as a ring modulator, and it's based heavily on the VCS3 and Synth AKS ring mod, which is all discrete circuitry. I mean, actually, in the EMS, it uses an IC, but the IC is just basically it's a matched transistor set. So I did it with all discrete circuitry, and so it's AC coupled as that is, and it sounds fantastic. But then I thought, well, one of the interesting things you can do with a ring modulator is that you can use it as a frequency doubler. Just by connecting the two inputs together, you have a frequency doubler. And then I thought, well, that's interesting because, well, I've got a frequency doubler here, so how about if I put some subs on it as well?
Go both ways.
And so I thought so we can just put a single. We can just put a single triangle into it, and we can get all of these. We can get a couple of subs, the fundamental and an octave as well.
It's almost like organ drawbars.
Yes.
You told me the patch around the time the module was released, and it does, having that octave above and two below and the core that you're running at. Yeah. Is that where the mixer then came in? Have I got all this other kind of octave shifting going on?
Yeah. It needs a 5-input mixer to mix all of this together. So the CP3 was the obvious mixer because it distorts in an interesting way. And it's all discrete, so it fell into the same pot as everything else that's in there. But the other thing with the subs themselves, it's very, very easy to generate subs that are square waves, and they're as soon as you use them in a mix, it just muddies everything because of the odd harmonics in it. It just so I thought what we really need is sine waves, and so I just designed up some shaping circuits to so that we can, because they start out as square waves. You're using we're just using flip flop to divide down, and which gives you a square wave. But after that, I put some filtering, and the filtering's different on each of them, so that we get a shaped sine wave, which sits so much better in the mix.
Yeah, way better.
Yeah.
And the 5 inputs on the mixer, it does the thing that I would have to patch otherwise, or not always, but where ring modulators can get really clangorous, you're then also mixing the inputs back in with the output of the ring mod. That's right.
Again, and part of it was just driven by the fact that, well, I want a 14 HP module, a ring modulator, and it's 2 inputs and 1 output normally.
Yeah, 3 sockets and that's it.
That's it. So how do we make it? How do we make it more versatile and musically more useful? And that was really by being able to patch the inputs into the mixer as well, and have this kind of approach that, well, if you don't want to use the subs, then those 2 mixer channels are available for external inputs as well.
So let's take a look at this saturating 4-octave generating patch with the Ring SM, which is literally 1 cable in, 1 cable out, a single triangle wave pushed into this, thick 4-octave sound. So now monitoring this directly, we'll come back to the patch that we started with in a second. My X input here, so the X in, the X mix on the mixer, the only input, just a triangle wave from the MiniMod oscillator, and this being a Moog CP freestyle mixer, you can push in and saturate this really musically. But keeping it clean, with just 1 input here and the frequency double switch on, with the ring modulator, you can generate an octave up. So listen how this blends in. You have that higher, brighter, octave up set of harmonics. And again, you can push these into the saturation. Really nicely. We then have a -1 octave sub. and a -2 octave sub. And again, we have this kind of thick 4 octave, more organ-like sound, say, than just a single triangle oscillator. You can push up. Into lots of saturation. Now, just going back to the simple triangle here, I'm going to play a arpeggio into the Vox octave on my oscillator. And this is a 4-note arpeggio with some additional transposition mixed into the Vox octave. Muting that is going into 2 channels of a low-pass gate here, and I'm going to strike them on the left-hand side hard left in the mix every 3 steps, and on the right-hand side every 5. Bit of added delay too. So we have a really interesting polymetric thing happening here where the pitch is a 4-step pattern, and then we're articulating it every 3 and every 5 steps. It creates these long evolving rhythmic patterns. Now keeping it clean, octave up. Subs. Creates a really lovely sound. But again, let's push into this saturation. It's a ton of tone from a single or triangle input. So as we keep moving forward, there's a really interesting mix of kind of vintage, say, replicas, clones of things like the EMS random voltage generator, which is an interesting oddity of the kind of synth world. But then also things that kind of pull things forward, like the next phase as a phaser does things that classic phasers and lots of modern phasers don't do. And then also things like the multi-burst envelopes, which I don't have anything else that does what that does and would take several modules to patch. Yeah. Do you like kind of skirting between both or leaning one way or the other?
I mean, the thing is, this is my hobby and my passion, and it's really it's whatever motivates me. I'll just think, wouldn't it be nice to do that? I mean, the random voltage generator is the EMS one is an absolute crazy circuit. I mean, it just shouldn't work. It does, but it shouldn't work. And it was, and that was such a challenge. And I think really, these are I call them jigsaws for engineers, because it's trying to get to the bottom of why something works, why it works in that way. And that really was the challenge. It was a challenge with that was to work out exactly how it worked, and then to replicate that using the parts that we used at the time, but to try and make it so that it was reliable enough to use in a modern day modular synth. And I think we pulled it off. With that, it's certainly a very, very interesting module, and it's just on the point of working versus not working. I mean, which a lot of the EMS stuff was. And that was the fascination with that one. Really, it was just to walk down sort of memory lane, because things like what it actually does, you could program a pick chip to do it, and build a module that does the functions that it does, but it doesn't do them in the way that does, and that was that was the fascinating part of it, really. So that was I didn't think we'd say. I thought, no one's going to buy this, because there's with all of the stuff that's available in Eurorack, why would somebody want one of these vintage random voltage generators? But it is actually a very useful module. Yeah. But then to move on to some of the other ones, like the multi-burst envelopes, there's a lot of burst modules available in modular. But I thought, well, why do you use bursts? I use them for envelopes. So surely we should have some kind of an envelope burst module, and so we just played around with that, and we landed up with the multi-burst envelopes.
I think the thing that really makes that as well is the level shifting. It makes it incredibly musical to be able to fade something in or fade it out.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean that was the eureka moment with it, really. That, you know, when I thought, well, because I had it with bursts, and I create a burst of it, but I thought, but in nature, you know, when you get a burst of something, it tends to decay, or it'll get louder. So we've got to put that functionality into it, and once we put that in, we thought, yeah, that's it. Yeah, we've got it now.
So here's a really fun patch with the multi-burst envelopes. That's the focus here, but of course the whole thing just sounds great. Now if I mute what this is doing, here's a kind of basic sound. It's a single oscillator here into the filter and VCA with the envelopes controlling them. A little tip here, patching in linear FM, linear CV from an LFO, we get a vibrato effect that creates this much richer, wider kind of sound. If I remove it, a single saw wave sounds great, but that little bit of wobble, it's just got this kind of effect going on. There's some additional stepped random modulation, and this is going through a delay here as well. Just a great sounding single oscillator synth line. And then muting that, this line is controlled by the multi-burst envelopes. In terms of the audio path, this is 2 oscillators. I'm using the Sharktooth wave, which, again, stating the obvious as I have already, that perfect blend is not as bright as the saw wave and not as dull as a triangle. That's coming into 2 low-pass gates, and it's the multi-burst envelope that's opening the low-pass gates. So 2 oscillators in stereo here into some reverb. I'm sending the clock out of my pattern generator, and a trigger every time the pattern repeats, so every couple of bars. That triggers the behaviour happening. The internal LFO is off, so it's all on the clock pulse. And I'm using the slope, number of bursts set to 8, or whatever we want to set it to. We have the different envelope shapes. I like this exponential decay. We can make that really tight and snappy. And a burst doesn't have to be faster than your main line. It doesn't have to be, say, a 30-second note like a ratchet. It can just be running along at the kind of pattern and timing that the rest of the setup is, which is exactly what's happening here. Now, sloping this in, and I'll go all the way left, this will slope in from silence, so the voltage of these bursts will rise over time. And fading something in is such a simple concept, but it's one that we don't always do, certainly not with our modulation. And having this fading as a kind of octave up accent, these oscillators are an octave higher than this one. It's a really lovely thing. Let's go for less bursts. So triggering a number of bursts with an envelope shape rather than them being just triggers. And being able to fade those in or fade them out. It's an incredibly musical module. Definitely go check out the full demo for that one. So bringing it kind of fast tracking us through to the most recent thing, we have the RadioPhonic system behind you. Yeah. We will explore this in another video, but what is that system to you? How do you view putting a system together as a kind of...
I was just given a blank sheet of paper. It just said, make the ultimate modular system.
So while I have you, Alan, I did ask patron supporters over on Discord if they had any specific questions, so I'll just fire some questions at you if that's okay. HECKSEVEN asked, can you name a time or two when musicians surprised you with how they've used your instruments or modules?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think really the ones is Wayne Taylor, that does the Dreams of Wires, does the AJH Synth videos for the YouTube channel and the website, and Wayne never ceases to amaze me. Some of the things that he can do with these modules, particularly I think he did a tribute to Klaus Schulze, and in that he created a vocal sound from the modules that I'd never dreamed they'd be able to do. It was, and that's just one example. There are many. That is, he really surprises me with what he can get out of them.
Isaac the Great, who is a Toadstool Tech, says, how did you go about modelling the Lunar Communicator? And I'll put an image on screen for people that maybe don't know that module. Were original schematics referenced? Have you had to use period-accurate components? Maybe start with what it is, the Lunar module.
Well, the Lunar module was a bit of fun. It was just something, we're going to sell one or two of these. We really are, because it was just so left field, really. But it was around the Apollo missions, and we were just fascinated with the Quindar tones that we used, which it was a tone that's used to turn the transmitters on and off when as the lunar module was, or as they were circling the Earth. They're obviously radio transmissions work on line of sight. So as they went around various parts of the world, they'd have to turn on and off various transmitters. So to do that, they used these Quindar tones, which were sent over telephone lines at the time. So it was just a sine wave. So, I mean, obviously we don't use the original schematics and circuitry that we used at the time. It was just the problem that we had to solve was how do we produce a sine wave that locked into that frequency, and we decided to make the whole module with discrete components. So it's all of the circuitry is transistor, and that's one of the things it does. But it was designed to distort voice and limit the bandwidth as on it, and it was just a bit of fun. It was just we just really enjoyed designing that one.
Yeah, transform your modular with space transmission.
Yes, absolutely.
Technology.
And I've heard some very creative videos done with it, actually. Yeah.
So JJB asks, when will we see new modules from AJH?
Very soon, and I think there may even be one hiding in this room somewhere. Yeah. Who knows? Certainly, I think we'll be having a product launch at Superbooth. We're very excited about it, actually. It's a module that's been 2 years in development, and I'm really pleased to where we've got to with it.
DARKLORD asks, how about releasing a smaller free-use synth bundle or smaller module that's a full instrument, almost like an entry level into AJH? Yeah,
something that I have given some thought to, and I think there is. It certainly would be nice to have an AJH MiniMod synth voice, if you like, rather than having to put it together as a full system. I mean, obviously it would be compromised. Because and the question would be, well, why would you want to create the voice when you can already do it with individual modules? But there's it's something that I have looked at, and for the future, yeah, certainly never say never.
Some mutual friend of ours, an artist, Richard QUIRK, who's I think had bits of your gear and even some 5U stuff over the years, said one thing he's never got round to asking you is how you went from the Oakley phaser module, which was a clone of the Small Stone, to the 12-stage phaser module that he still has from you from some time ago. So I'm presuming each of these are things you've made along the years and Richard's had. Alongside a dual app quadra phaser that you'd built him, and Jürgen Hebel PCBs were part of that. How did all that kind of lead and build to the mega phase and the next phase modules?
Yeah, well, it's that started in the synth DIY days, and I mean, me and Richard go back quite a long way. We were modular Isle of Man at one point. I think we're the only two,
the two of you,
the only two people Isle of Man into modular, and at the time I was doing a lot of synth DIY, and I built the Oakley Equinox phaser, which was a 4-stage based on the Small Stone. And that was a 5U module, and I made that into 3U by turning the PCB the other way around and squeezing it into a 3U case. And it sounded nice, but then I thought, well, wouldn't it be better if I took it to 12-stage instead of 4? So I designed an expander PCB that clamped onto the Equinox module and made it 12 stage, and that was quite interesting. So we could individually select the stages with that, and then that just kind of disappeared. That's going to be 20 odd years ago, maybe more. But then with the AJH Synth, I'd always loved the sound of the small stone. So I thought, well, how about if I make a 12 stage phaser, but if we can do something clever with the emphasis loop, the resonance loop, so that we can take the resonance from a different stage to the phaser stage. And so that became the mega phase, which we launched, and it was it sounded great. It really did sound good. And then we developed that into the next phase, which people wanted a lower noise floor, and they wanted a little bit more versatility in inputs and things, and so that turned into the next phase phaser, which now, because of the way that you can select the stage and the emphasis returns on it, and that one can also be mono in, stereo out. It's very, very useful phaser. Let's say I built them all. I built the Hebel phaser, the Tau phaser, and the Schulze phaser, and all. I've built virtually all of them, and the ARP quadriphaser, and all of them with phasers. They very much, each one just has its own sound, and that's all it does. It just does one phase and sound. But the idea with the next phase was to try and develop something that could sound like most other phases, which is what it does quite well.
Yeah, being, as you say, switching out the emphasis path separate to the poles in the kind of audio path.
Yeah.
Really flexible.
Yeah, and also having the colour, being able to change the colour of the phasing as well. Yeah.
Pipe Fontana asked, they were asking about the phaser that we've just covered, but they mentioned, and we can maybe think about this for anything really, not just the phaser. How do you know when something sounds and functions as it should?
Yeah. Well, we've got a very useful piece of test equipment in the lab that we use, and it's called a pair of ears. And we've, I've got a workshop full of very high-end test equipment and everything. But at the end of the day, we produce them things for audio, and the way that you do it is when it sounds right, it is right. It can take some guess. Sometimes you'll get there very quickly. Other times it's a lot of work. But ultimately, it's a pair of ears. When it sounds right, it is right.
So as I said at the start, I hope you've liked this kind of celebration concept of hybrid interview and patches. It's been really fun to do. It's nice to put the work in and kind of really, I feel like, showcase Allan and AJH and the great work that they do. Their modules genuinely have been a real pleasure to use over the years and have been a real mainstay in my personal setups as well. You can support me over on patreon.com/DivKid. That's certainly going to help do more of this in the future, along with gaining access to lots of exclusives over there, and importantly, the DivKid Discord community. Thanks for everyone that already supports. You can hit like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.